Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. A new biography of Pope Francis explores what is described as his revolutionary thinking. Francis has been celebrated and criticized by both liberals and conservatives alike, and refuses to be pinned into one political camp. Where does this come from? Here to explain is Austin Ivory, author of The Great Reformer, Francis and the Making of a Radical Pope. Very interesting stuff. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You know, lots of Catholics think that Francis is too liberal, yet a lot of the Jesuits in Argentina actually think he's a little too conservative. Now, what is it? Where does this come from?
Well, that's right. I mean, when both sides, in a way, are attacking him from their own point of view, you realize there's something else going on. What I show in the book, actually, is the people who have opposed him have always been the intellectuals, the elites, if you like. And they've often misunderstood him because they're looking at him through their own lens. In fact, I think he's a gospel radical, and he disconcerts everybody. He disconcerts us all, because actually what he's about is the essence of the gospel. But he's not a liberal. I think that's a complete misunderstanding of him. He's a radical, not a liberal. But he's not a conservative, because he's open very much to the action of the Holy Spirit. He's open, he's free, he's spontaneous, because he's aware that God is in charge, not human beings.
You know, I heard one preacher talk about this sort of commingling between law and love, that there is this sort of two elements that are constantly in tension, and that's seemingly how I could describe Pope Francis.
I think that's a great description. If there's one thing that comes across from my study of him, is that he has this phenomenal capacity to live in tension. He's able to endure what actually for most of us is very hard to endure, which is a kind of a contradiction. But actually it's the tension that's at the heart of the gospel, right? I mean, it's Jesus who treats the adulteress not just as a sinner, but as a victim in need of healing. Now, how do you uphold the law while at the same time loving those who can't live up to the law? That's the tension that the church must live in. It's the tension that the church lives in actually all the time. And he's saying to the church, we need to be able to endure that tension and allow the Holy Spirit in, and that's where we get the development, that's where we get the action, not just in the church but in our own lives.
And it's more comfortable for all of us to sort of live in one camp.
Yeah.
It defines us, it's much more easily, there's no tension there.
And he said at the end of the synod last month, he said to the synod fathers at the end of it, look, don't fall into the mistake of either doctrinal inflexibility, being really rigid, but on the other hand, don't try and conform to the world. These are all temptations. He knows that the church must live constantly tempted to do these things. No, it must stay clear, focused on Christ and the gospel. Very
interesting example. He had some very tough words on gay marriage as Cardinal Bergoglio. Also, in just recently, in the issue of the Synod on the complementarity of man and woman in marriage.
Yeah.
But in the past, he's also said, who am I to judge?
Yeah.
How do these things work together?
Well, he's a firm defender of Catholic teaching and on marriage, as I show in the book. You know, when he was Cardinal Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he described the attempt to redefine marriage by the government at the time as the work of the devil. Why? Because it was seducing people with equality and all those other good things, which of course Christians believe in, but in fact was radically altering the essential reality of man-woman marriage. So he's really completely firm on those things. But he knows it's not enough to just have the truth of the doctrine, that actually Christianity is something that is lived and that is actually about bringing people into contact with God's healing love. So his primary concern is that people know that about God. And what he wants is, in terms of the spiritual exercises, he wants the first week to come before the second week, which means when people experience that love of God, that forgiveness of God, then they're able to listen and to hear the truth of the church's doctrines. And then that's when the conversion happens. The problem is that we often go to the second week without giving people the first week.
Very interesting. But, you know, one of the things he has said, he wants the vision for the church, a poor church for the poor. And you see the opulence of the Vatican. I mean, you can see the opulence of someone like St. Patrick's Cathedral. How realistic is that for the church to have a poor church for the poor?
Well, I think when he's talking about a poor church, he doesn't mean a church which is, you know, denuded of, you know, great art. He's not talking about, you know, we should be worshipping in a hut, not in St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's about saying we need a church which identifies with the powerless and with the poor in that sense. The people who depend on God and the Holy Spirit. And really, his invitation to the church, his invitation to all of us, is to depend on God and the Holy Spirit, because that's where our true strength comes from, not from power, wealth, prestige, status. So don't cling to those things which, if you like, are not of God. They're good things, they're gifts, but don't cling to them. Get your sustenance from where it must come from. That's what it means by a poor church for the poor, that also speaks directly to the concerns of ordinary people. That's why when he began his papacy, first thing he did, he went to an island in the Mediterranean to talk about immigration, because he knows, for poor people, migration is a big deal. That's dominates their lives. He then went to another island to talk about unemployment, jobs. If you're poor, what do you care about? Jobs and that kind of thing. So it's rather than being abstract, speak about the things that matter to ordinary people.
Very interesting. Austin Ivory, the book is called The Great Reformer, Francis and the Making of a Radical Pope. Some interesting stuff going to come out of the church now. Thank you so much for being on A Spirited Debate.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
And thank you